So our next question is going to go into length of sessions. So what do you all think is the ideal length for a webinar session? Ariana, we'll start with you.
Yeah, great question. And speaking of, we only have so much time. I think, at Uber for Business, we used to do 60-minute webinars. This is especially common during the pandemic when we were all, living off of Zoom. But that said, I think for us to be smarter with both our speakers' time and our time as well as our audience's time, we started focusing on 30-minute webinars. As I was mentioning earlier with the heroes that are college professors and them creating, 60-minute lectures on a regular basis, you can still get a lot of content out in 10 to 15 minutes. But I think a lot of us are used to 30-minute meetings. So that's why we tend to simulate our webinars to take a similar amount of time. Steph, what do you think?
Yeah, I am also on the camp of shorter the better. I do think that it depends on, again, going back to your marketing goals and what you want to achieve in the session, but we too have been kind of leaning towards the 30-minute mark for webinars. And to your point about speakers, it's also a very different ask if you're asking a speaker to speak on an hour webinar versus a 30-minute webinar. An hour can sometimes feel a bit daunting, but one example I wanted to bring up about a shorter webinar is something that we do at Iron Horse. It's our webinar program called our Coffee Breaks. And this program started off as the intent was it to be a super short, snackable pieces of content once a month, 15, 20-minute sessions. Sometimes they extend to 30, but we really wanted it to be a space and time for people to grab a cup of coffee, take a break from work, and spend a little bit of time with us and learn something new. And that has resonated really well because, again, you don't have to block off a huge chunk of your schedule because I know, as we all know, we're all super busy, have lots of meetings going on. So it's nice when you can kind of sprinkle in some short learnings with your audience if that's something that resonates well with them.
Meetings are definitely the name of the game here at Uber. So also being really intentional with folks' time is something that comes to mind for us a lot. We've also seen with our own webinars that people tend to stick with us for about 25 minutes. And beyond that, data shows that people's average attention span with webinars ranges from 10 to 20 minutes. So just food for thought when it comes to thinking about the length of your webinars.
Yeah, I will double click on that one because we're actually about getting ready to launch our 2024 webinar benchmark report. And one of our findings was the average drop-off time is about like 30 minutes when you look across our data set. But one thing that was really fascinating that's a little like off Richter from kind of where our conversation is going is we've actually seen a growth in webinars being 60 minutes or more, which I thought was really fascinating. I think the number was like 15% of the webinars we reviewed, which was like, I think over 6,000 webinars. So a lot of content, 15% of them are doing 60 minutes or more, which I thought was fascinating. But again, I think going back to the start of this conversation, it's all about your business goals and what the point of your content is. So always keep that in mind. So we've talked about session length. So now I want to talk about topics. How do you pick topics based on your audience's need? Ariana, what are your thoughts here?
Yes. So I personally, as a marketer, I think it's balancing between what we want to say as a company versus what your audience actually wants to hear, or even how they want to hear from you. So some things that we keep in mind, B2B is human too. Nobody wants to be sold to. It also doesn't have to be stuff you're boring. So that's something we keep in mind when it comes to the creativity of the topics that we choose, and also the presentation format that we deliver them in. Tying back to what Stephanie was saying earlier, whether it's fireside chats, whether it's, live demos, whether it's, your typical presentation with a slideshow format, things like that.
Yeah, agreed. I always come back to the question, if you're wondering what your audience wants to hear about, you should ask them. So we really live and breathe that every day. So for our webinars, we ask during the post-webinar survey, what do you want to hear about next from us? So we do this both for our Iron Horse webinars and also for Uber for Business. And really, it's been really great to have a running list of topics that the audience is hungry for. So Ariana and I will go back to this list really often and see if there's anything we can kind of bubble up to the surface for a future webinar. we also, so that's post-event, but also pre-event, you can ask your registrants. We include a field on the form, the registration form, that asks, what questions do you have for our speakers? So it could be on a certain topic, the topic of that said webinar. And that is really great insight into the webinar as you're creating it along the way, right? So you can kind of sprinkle in some of those questions to the session if it's applicable. If it's not directly applicable to that session, we can add it to our running list of other ideas and questions from the audience. So you can get really good insights from your audience base. They have a lot of great ideas, and you can add that to your running list.
And a shout out to the Iron Horse team as well. Like what Stephanie was saying, whether it's a post-webinar survey or when folks are registering, asking them if they have any questions for our speakers, that was testament to their expertise. I actually hadn't even thought of that, but I thought it was a brilliant addition because I'm very data driven. So taking into account what people are saying pre or post webinar on what they want to hear, what their questions are, also keeping in mind what's happening in the market, and of course, what are our customers asking us about? What are they saying? Keeping all those three elements in mind help inform the webinar content strategy that we create together year over year.
Yep, agreed. And I think that you can always kind of think back to what unique point of view does your company have on a specific topic that's really hot in the market or in your specific industry. Those can kind of give you some good ideas of jumping off points of different webinar topics as well.
Yeah, and one we have done ourselves is in your reminder emails for your event, put in a line that says, hey, do you have questions about XYZ topic? Email it to, Lindsay@goldcast.io. And I think that does two things there. It builds rapport between whoever is your webinar programming person or whoever your host or moderator is, building that relationship, but then also like opening that channel of conversation, like you all said, with your audience.